This beta patch will run from the 6th of July to the 3rd of August. And oh my goodness, has there been a big update for super heavy tanks? This is going to blow your mind. And to be fair, there wasn't much reason to make super heavy tanks, but now, oh golly, now there is. Let us begin. Righty then, new beta patch, land changes. Let's rub our hands together, here we go. Reduce terrain, combat widths slightly. Welcome to the new meta of combat widths. So, we'll scroll to the bottom really quickly and have a little cheeky look at this. So, this is it. These are the new combat widths now for terrains. And before you guys say, oh no, I just learned the new changes, I can tell you two things to summarize it. It's going to make you super happy. One, it doesn't make a big difference to the current meta, particularly the combat widths that are in the 10s and 20s. They're practically the same. The effectiveness is practically the same. However, the big changeroo is in between the 30s and the 40s. So now, the ones that were effective at 40, 42, and 44, they've now been switched to the 30s. So now, the 40s are slightly less effective. Guys, don't go crazy. It's not a massive change. And then the 30s are slightly more effective. That is the kind of long-term implication of this, all right? Without further ado, let us look at the spreadsheet meta. So this gentleman creeped into my DMs and he showed me the new data for combat width meta. All right, are you ready? Are you sat down? Okay, so first of all, this is the combat widths, okay? So they are an average modifier based on terrain weight, an average, okay? Blue represents the new combat widths, and red represents the old combat widths. So blue is new, red is old. I have to remind myself. So here we see the combat widths that used to be effective in the olden days is red. So we can see 44 is something that was a favorite for mine. 42, very effective as well. Surprisingly, 45 is actually pretty good as well. I never actually knew that. Didn't use 40s very often, but for the most part, 40s are nowhere near as effective as they once were. And 30s were terrible. So you would always be incentivized to upgrade it from the 20s straight into the 40s and skip the 30s. So you can see here, the reds in the 30s were dreadful, with 38 being the absolute worst. But to be fair, there was definitely a dip in the 30s. And as I said to you, the 30s and the 40s have been switcherooed around because you can see now the blue is the new one. And blue in the 30s now is fantastic, with 36 being amazing. Oh, 36 is looks like the new meta. Therefore, as you can see, 40 has had a bit of a jump. So 40 is actually more effective than it used to be. However, we've lost the big peak at the very end. So now it looks like the late 40s aren't as effective as they used to be. And that's pretty much the only change. If you look at the left side of the graph here, it's practically identical. They're following each other very, very closely. So overall, it's not even made a massive impact. It did look like red was ever so slightly more effective to begin with. I mean, we're talking percentage amounts here. 1%, 2% is so different. So this is how it changes your game. It means now you're incentivized to do the 30 meta instead of the 40 meta. However, 40 still are pretty good because they have the optimal amount of stats. So you're always still incentivized to go for the 30s. It's incentivized to go for the 40s over the 30s. However, you look into min-max, your terrain width, the 30s is what you want to go with. So the key points to take away from this is 36 as well as 40 looks to me the most effective for stats and combat width wise, where the old metas in the late 40s are nowhere near as effective. However, if you want the closest that you had in the past, 44 is the best when it comes down to the more ginormous sizes. So 36, 40, and 44. You got those numbers? Bank them in your brain. Okay, are we done now? Okay. So the good news is the changes are minimal, and it doesn't make an overall big change to the gameplay. All right, next up, super heavy tanks are now support units. Super heavy tanks are no longer line battalions. This is huge. This is absolutely massive. Oh, this is massive. This is massive. So in my average game, I never make super heavies. I thought they were kind of pointless, to be honest with you. They come too late and they're so unbelievably expensive. I just don't feel like they really fit into a normal game. This is a super heavy tech. It comes in 1943 or maybe 44. No, it's 1943. And they're just ridiculously expensive when it comes down to resources. You need a ridiculous amount of them to fill them into a battalion. But now you are incentivized to make them, because if you go for a super heavy tank now, look at those stats. 62 armor onto an infantry division. Oh my bejeebus. Only 20 of them are needed as part of a division. And overall, the stats are fantastic. One of the big disadvantages of super heavies is they had big terrain penalties. Oh, and okay, they're still there. If you look at the bottom there, it has plus 10% attack for forts, minus 10% movement for hills, and 20% movement for mountains. Wow. So there's no actual penalties for movement. So from my perspective, this is the reason why super heavies were not worthwhile. Too late, too expensive, and the terrain penalties were too high. The terrain penalties are gone. They're now significantly cheaper due to the fact you only need 20 of them for one support battalion. And the third thing is they still do come a little bit late. So I suppose we've got 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? Oh, and someone else has just spotted too. It adds no hardness to the division as well. And that's support companies don't add hardness. So in that case, it doesn't add any hardness, which, to be honest with you, was one of the big perks of super heavies, because it had like 100% hardness, I believe. Yeah, 100% hardness. And that stat doesn't even apply anymore, because you can't override it and add it on as a battalion anymore. It has to be a support company. But it has fantastic armor. Yeah. The meta of super heavy tanks was always to make one that was practically naked. Yeah, the meta of this was to make one that was practically naked, because you were just adding it on just simply for the armor. So what you would try and do is make it as cheap as possible. So let's say you would add on easy maintenance to make it 5% cheaper. And then you would go for a gas turbine and add enough armor on it so it can move, I guess. And you would end up something like this. 52 production cost is still pretty high. However, hey, it's spreadsheet meta time. Are you ready for the spreadsheet meta? Once upon a time, I made a video talking about the most optimal space marines. So why not add that to the spreadsheet, right? Hey, why not add it to the spreadsheet? Let's add it in. So the most effective space marine. So I did add on the super heavy tank here, and it was ranked with a ratio 11.79. So just to summarize really quickly, this is the cost to add on a single battalion onto a division. And this would be the resulting of the amount of armor it would get. And then I created like a ratio score to get an idea of how effective that was overall. And it turns out in 1943, the most effectiveness for production-wise to get armor on a division was the 1943 heavy tank. But then in 1939, it was the medium. And then 1936, it was also the medium as well. And then as well, we took it a step further with part 2, where it turns out the most effective is the AA versions of the medium. They're the ones most cost effective. So let's just do that. Let's just take that to the next level. Let's do it again. 1943, super heavy tank. And we're going to make it, I guess we could make it as 1939 tech, I suppose. We're going to basically make it as cheap as possible. Because at the end of the day, we're doing it basically to add armor on. That's the only purpose of this. So we end up with pretty much this. This is the cheapest we could even make it. I suppose I could argue you could add maintenance on, but I don't want to give it an unfair advantage because none of the models of the previous tanks had easy maintenance on. There is one factor that's important, is I can't put a small turret on this. The game will not allow me to do it. So the smallest turret I can put it is a 3-man turret, which turns out this is a big machine gun. This is a pretty big machine gun. Oh my goodness, machine gun boys. Oh my. So if we were to add on the super heavy tank, and a mouse adds on a total amount of 40.5 armor, because this is the same division I was working with on the previous tests, which on hindsight is actually quite low for 1943. That's actually very low. So you could argue that the armor on this isn't really optimal for its era. However, I feel like this is going to be super cost effective because this is going to be dirty cheap. So the production cost of this one is 1,032.2, and the calculation here ranks it incredibly low. So the super heavy tank here had a ratio score 11.79, and now it's 25.9. The truth is, I could have added more armor onto this to give it more of a punch. That would increase the cost significantly. So therefore, I would question how effective that would be overall. From looking at these numbers, this looks like a not very cost-effective Space Marines. The armor is too low, and the production cost is too high. So this is a bit of a weird one. It doesn't really fit into anywhere. And one of the most key, most effective parts of super heavy tanks was it had really high hardness. It's not adding any hardness on. Now, if this division did have hardness on it, and it did add some hardness, it would be a consolation prize. However, I don't think this is worth it. I suppose you could argue that it's a support company now, so it's not eating into your combat with, I guess. So with a maintenance company, with easy maintenance, it's now 99250, which gives it down a score of 24.51. Okay, so from that little spitball test, it looks like super heavy tanks really aren't that effective. Not very effective. So I can't recommend them. Hey, they're a fun meme. They're a fun meme. But I can't recommend them. So in short, super heavy tanks don't look like the most cost effective. It looks like heavy threes are the way forward, but keeping the cost down as low as possible to get the most armor out of it and reduce the cost overall. Remember, cost effectiveness, super important. Okay, armor skirts provide one additional piece of armor. That's interesting because I love armor skirts. They give breakthrough. It gives armor as a flat stat. So from my perspective, this is a win-win situation because this is something I use quite frequently. Armor skirts. So armor skirts now give 3 breakthrough and also 3 armor. Guys, this is a straight win-win situation. Do you know what one really good change would be awesome? Every one of these techs unlock a new module. Just to give you something to work towards, something fun, you know what I mean? It'd be kind of just really cool if these technologies all gave a module with them as well, just for something to add later in the game, just for the purpose of something special. Just having the ability to add more ticks of speed or armor is just, I guess, it's not as fun. Tank chassis now grant 10% or 20% more armor. This is such a good change, and the reason why this is a good change is sometimes you are incentivized to stick with the interwar tank model for the entirety of the game. I know that sounds silly, but at the end of the day, the modules weren't really that different. At the end of the day, what the main thing you were gaining from the module was reliability, and that's still the case. So 160 for the most advanced, 130 for the second, and the most basic one, excluding the interwar one, is 100% reliability. When you add on stuff onto it, it reduces it down. And as you can see now, the armor's 38 to 46 to 54. Is that an increase, though? I don't know what the original numbers actually were. So we're looking at the light modules here. So armor is 10 to 16 to 20. And the heavies here, we've got the maximum of 76, 54, 42. These don't seem like massive increases, but it says 10% to 20%. So I presume there were the increases, I presume. One factor that's important is the higher the chassis armor, the more armor you're going to get from the armor type that you select. Because look, cast armor here increases the armor by 50% from the base amount. And the base amount is going to be the chassis. So in that case, overall, cast armor as well as welded armor, which is a 30% buff, is going to result in a net increase of armor by definitely a massive amount based on, well, an increased amount based on what we were already given. Super heavy tanks now cost more overall, but require 20 per support company. Hand on heart, I don't think this is a good change. At the end of the day, from my honest perspective, this needs to be cost effective to want to put it onto your division. At the moment, I don't think it is cost effective. I think at the moment it is still too expensive. The production cost for an advanced tank chassis is 14.4. The tank chassis for the super heavy tank is 50.7. An eye-watering amount of production cost. Not worth it. We showed the spreadsheet earlier. Not worth it. 100%. How do you feel? How do you think the changes are going to affect the game? Please comment below. Apart from that, boys, have a really good day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And this video is the next one. Give it a click. This one might be right up your alley. I'll see you soon. Peace out. God bless. Bye-bye.